Welcome to the Brilliant Humans podcast, where we celebrate extraordinary people. But here's the catch. No one's talking about themselves. Every guest is here to share the story of a brilliant human who shaped them, inspired them, or changed their life forever. They might be famous or completely unknown, alive or no longer with us, a teacher, a parent, a stranger, a leader, a friend. These are real stories, honestly told. Stories of kindness, creativity, courage and connection, because brilliance deserves to be shared. This is the Brilliant Humans podcast. Welcome to the show. Today on the Brilliant Humans podcast, I'm joined by the wonderful Ryan Curtis Johnson. Ryan is a retired dancer and now Chief Comms Officer at Valuable 500 and describes himself as a proud, gay, neurodivergent dad with two neurodivergent kids. So it won't surprise you that he's passionate about empathy, inclusion and accessibility. In his spare time, he loves theatre, running, yoga, word searches, and has been part of not one, but two Guinness World Records, which I'm going to need to hear more about those before we start. But for now, welcome, Ryan. Hello.
Hello. Well, thank you for having me. That's first things first.
Thank you so much for coming on. We're going to dive into your brilliant human in a second, but there's a few things in that intro that I want to jump into. Valuable 500. What is Valuable 500?
Well, the Valuable 500 is the second largest, and we're happy to be second to the UN, largest CEO network of CEOs who are committed to end disability exclusion. So it was something that was set up by our founder, Caroline Casey, who is a registered blind lady, and it was to really end the CEO silence. So working with these wonderful companies to, really drive that disability inclusion agenda, but on a leadership level.
Because actually on the reverse, we hear about the negative side of DEI being reduced, but obviously,
Exactly.
That's great. Well, I will be checking that out. And then secondly, and I'm not going to say more importantly, because nothing's more important than that, but the two Guinness World Records. How do you become part of two Guinness World Records? What have you done?
Well, one that's really easy to explain, because a lot of people, I think, with the second one will be like, the second one I achieved was just recently. This year in 2025, I completed the London Marathon, and it was the largest amount of finishers. So I think it was 57,000 in total, and I think I was like 56,200 and something. So that's my one, and I do have a certificate for that. The first one I don't have a certificate for, but it was definitely achieved, and that was the longest line dance in the Millennium Dome, which is now known as the O2. I used to go country line dancing, loved it. Being a dancer, all sort of different ways.
It's amazing.
Did that in the Millennium Dome, which
you're showing your age. You're showing I remember the Millennium Dome. We're showing our age now, because
that body part was amazing. Do you not remember when you had to go in the heartbeat?
Every school in the southeast of England went to that. Amazing. Well, look, thank you so much for coming on. We're this is the new podcast celebrating brilliant humans, and you've got someone so brilliant that you want to talk about, and I know very little, so I'm going to be going on this journey along with the listeners as much as them. So let's jump straight in. So who is your brilliant human, Ryan?
So my brilliant human, I think everyone would always say that a parent is a brilliant human to them, to that individual. But, my mum, Anne Curtis, was just a brilliant human because she stood for so many things. Sadly, she's no longer with us. So she passed away in 2022. So it'll be 3 years ago coming in. But my dad obviously plays a part as well, but I wouldn't be the person that I am today if it wasn't for her. So I think as much as we all sort of love our parents, I think when you go through a loss like this, she is just that person that I feel I owe so much to, and was able to give so much back to her in that time of need when she was passing.
But firstly, I'm so sorry that she's obviously gone, and I'm so glad we can keep her memory alive in ways like this. And I think, for me personally, it sometimes takes something like this, and it's so crazy because we have these brilliant people in our lives, and I think about my parents. Do I tell them that enough now while they're here? Probably not. Should I? So maybe that's something I'm going to take away from this. But look, When do you first consciously remember thinking this woman is brilliant?
Do you know what? I think I always like I am always known as being very much like my mum. So like a lot of her friends who I still stay in contact with, are her best friends and stuff like that, and even family members. I am like a sort of male version of her. Really, I look like her. I don't sound like her, and I don't dress like her, but I definitely, I take on her characteristics, and I am, and I think I was quite a shy kids. And I think some parents can sort of overcompensate and sort of think, oh, I'll just keep them away. But my mum was like very good at like pushing me and making me really drive further forward in things that I might have been worried or concerned about. Do you know what? I if I was going to pinpoint, I remember being in like year six at school, and the only reason I remember is because now, as you're older and you look back at times, my mum had just been diagnosed with MS. And I think, again, that's another moment where, as a kid, when you were a kid and you hear of something like that, you sort of grow up and you forget. I think we're also like what you're saying, Jonathan, about, you parents, maybe I should say more and stuff. When you're in it, you just don't think about it. And I think that's the beauty of wonderful relationships. And let's be really transparent here. Not everyone has wonderful relationships with their parents and don't often get to have that. So I feel extremely privileged and lucky to have that. But, she was diagnosed with MS and she used to get up every day, even though she struggled to get out of bed. And even like when I was going on my school residential, I was really nervous about going, and I'd had this big news that my mum had this thing that we didn't really know. Like I didn't really know what MS was. In our head, and I think like even when I talk about disability, it's disability is an ignorance. If it doesn't affect you and you don't come into touch to it, we can quite easily pass through life not really thinking about it. And I think when I then sort of found out, oh, what does it mean? And it's like, oh, we get in a wheelchair because it's the muscles and that nervous system that then decreases. And it was that element, and she forever suffered with like a dizziness. So the only way she ever explained it was like, imagine you'd come off a waltzer. It was that sort of like vertigo feeling. So we all as a family just really adapted. When she was on high escalators, you're just always on stairs, you had to step in front of her, and we all just went into autopilot. And I just always remember thinking, well, she never showed weakness. Like she never showed, like she still stood there, she still got up. And I think that was where I sort of first fall. You know, she was always a woman that spoke her mind, was opinionated and, a formidable force. But she was also a really strong woman. And I think women in that time, especially in the 80s as well, were very, suppressed sometimes. And my mum was very much a woman that was never shy to voice her opinion. And she would be the one to shout from the rooftop of those that maybe didn't have louder voices. So I think she was the one that sort of really taught me that we should accept everybody,
I love
not
that.
just lots of different people.
I love that.
So I think I think if I was going to pinpoint, that's where I sort of remember. And then I think, like anything, as coming out as gay, I think I speak to many friends of mine, and again, very privileged, lucky, but the relationship a gay man has with their mum, it's just a different thing. And I can't describe it. If someone said to me, "Well, describe it. What is it?" I think it's just that fact that there's that one person when you're going through that change and that element of coming out and being nervous and scared and worried and like, what's life going to be like for me? Because it was 20 years ago when I came out. It's very different to how it is now. Um, to know that I had this formidable woman that was so proud, but outing me before I was outing myself is another element where you just sort of think that's someone I'd want to pick on my team. But she was just on my team,
Yeah.
and that's kind of for me what she was really good at, just being an advocate, but being a challenger.
And it sounds like she was on other people's teams as well. So I want to come back to
Totally.
that. But I mean, you've just said something there that really landed with me about the ignorance of disability. And actually, I don't really know a lot about MS. So, and actually, recently, a friend of mine has been diagnosed with MS. So then I went and did a bit of research around it, and effectively, you can't. there's no cure for MS, is there?
No.
It's just going to get worse, and it might get worse slowly, and then peak,
Yeah.
and then
You can have
slowly. You
flare-ups.
can have
Yeah,
flare-ups, can't
exactly.
you? So what was it? What was it like? So you obviously you're talking the year 6, but that's so we're talking like 30 years ago, 31 years ago. I'm trying to sort
Yeah,
of.
yeah, yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean, that's for
yeah,
me. I'm maybe
30.
a bit older, but we're talking 30 years ago. So talk to me about her journey through that.
So it was really, she hadn't been well, so she was in bed, and it was just unlike her. Like, she might, like, be ill, but this was really unlike her. And I can't really pinpoint it, if that makes sense, but then it stopped her from doing things, so it took a while for her to then feel confident to drive again. They had to get the medication right that she was on. She actually went and, like, tried homeopathic, and I remember going with her, and that was really supportive and helpful. And then it would be more sometimes like she had a weaker side, so then she would be colder. It was sort of things like that, where she'd be colder on one side, or she just wouldn't be able to lift things as much. So it was just adapting more than anything. But to look at her, you'd think there was nothing wrong with her, and that's often where the ignorance comes in, because it'd be like, well, what do you do? Because, you might sort of say, oh, sorry, can I just step in front of you? I just want to get in front of my mum for the stairs. And they'd be like, people would be like, why? And it's like, well, she just struggles with stairs. So it was and she struggled a lot in big crowds, and that would send her quite giddy. But like anything, weather played a massive part in it. And so you just sort of, you kind of had to learn and adapt to it, really. But I think there was a lot of people where they were like, oh, I can't see anything wrong with you. I don't know what you're talking about. You look absolutely fine.
Yeah, which is why I love now the
Lanyards,
lanyards,
yeah.
yeah, which are great. Which
Hidden
and then
disabilities.
and it's fantastic. And I remember them coming out during COVID, and now they've sort
Yeah.
of carried on, and that sort of thing is brilliant. But anyway, she's living with MS, and let me just so the family was you, your mum, your dad,
And my
br-
brother.
and your
Yeah. And
brother.
I've got an older brother. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So she still had 2 kids to look after.
Yeah.
And you mentioned about you coming out. So did she talk to me about that? Because again, you sort of said not everyone's going to have a supportive mum in that situation,
No.
but she sounds like she was brilliant in that situation as well. So how did she show up for you?
Think it was a real interesting thing, because there was a cascade when I came out. It was more in the sense of, I told my mum. I don't think there was any surprise. I'd always loved dancing or anything like that, but I think I really threw them, because I brought home really attractive ladies when I was dating.
I mean, look at you, look at you. I mean, these
Well,
these girls these girls were only human, Ryan.
so I think, and then obviously when I kind of came out at sort of 20, I told my mum, and I remember, like, we sat in the garden, and I just told her, and she was fine about it. She was just like, okay, well, that's, what do you want to do about it? How do you want to do it, with your dad and stuff? And I just remember going, I can't tell dad. Like, I need you to tell dad. So, like, she told my dad, and then my dad told my brother. So it was sort of done in that sort of cascade. And, even from that point, it was often, there was conversations that she had with my dad. And, I think, like anything, my dad was just like, oh, it's a shame, because, we'll never have grandkids. And my mum was like, well, we didn't have kids to have grandkids. So, like that. And I did. So, we proved that one wrong. But in that time, you couldn't. So for me, as that decision to even come out, was I couldn't get married. The kids situation was going. I was brought up on 2.4 children. Like, I was used to seeing just a man and a woman. So I think it was that. And my mum was just sort of like, if you can't accept it, then there's going to be a problem here. Because my mum was very much about the fact that he's going to have to go through life constantly looking over his shoulder. And I don't ever want him not to feel comfortable in this house or here. So if you can't sort of come along on this or be comfortable with it, then we need to have discussions. And she was very much like that. And, she fell out with friends over it, which is another thing, because they were like, oh, are you not disappointed and stuff like that? Mom was like, no. Why would I be disappointed? So she was a real sort of ally. And I think that comes not just, from her, but from her mum and her parents, because, they did some wonderful things in their time, which would have been so sort of dead against certain things and people's opinions. And, I was talking to my cousin, I've got an elderly cousin, and like there was friends, they had gay friends growing up. And I remember like there's videos of me going and visiting this gay couple that were friends with my nan and granddad, and that my mum used to take me and my brother down to see. Um, so it was never an acceptance issue that I was gonna have. So she just fully embraced it and loved it.
Well, look, I mean, again, I think because of the context of when this happened and the age that she grew up in, it would have been
Mm,
very easy for her to sort of go down the traditional route of
yeah,
not supporting it. But that's
totally.
amazing. Um, and coming back to when you saw this, you were very, and rightfully so, very quick to say, "Oh, I want to talk about my mum." So, if you were to describe why she was, I mean, we've got the sort of her resilience, her caring nature, for you coming out, and her being a great mum. But what is it about her that really stands out in your mind when you think brilliant human? Was it
Yeah.
kindness? Was it courage?
I think it is kindness. Yeah, she was the go-to person. She was fiercely loyal to friends. In times of need and people, if there was a problem, she would be there and she would help. And they didn't need to be close friends. If it was a neighbor or anything like that, she was fiercely loyal and just kind, and would do anything for people and go above and beyond, because that's what she was about. Um, but then she'd be hard work as well, because she'd have an opinion and that would be her opinion. And, we would argue and we would fall out and we would challenge, but we would never let it fester or leave, because she'd then come back. And I think that is the beauty of it as well, is that you have to learn to go, well, we don't agree on that. And that's okay.
Isn't
But,
that what the world needs? Isn't that what the world needs right now? Kind of
totally,
kindness, care, love, but
totally.
also the ability to have a conversation and that be okay. That's exactly
Absolutely.
what we need.
Exactly, exactly. And I think that's the beauty of, why I think she was incredible. And, like little things. She once went for a job where she worked, and she didn't get it. And the only reason she didn't get it is because my mum had really lovely nails, and she like she just looked too good for the job. It was working on a production line, and so she didn't get it. So she then decided to then reapply, but went with ripped leggings, like sort of old leggings. She took all the jewelry off her fingers because she liked to wear jewelry, and she got the job. And I just like that sort of vibe, in the sense of, you don't be rejected, you just go back. And it was just something that she like just was all that's what she was all about.
Where did that come from? Where did her resilience come from? Do you know? Was that her parents, or does she cite someone else that she learnt that from?
Yeah, I think like my nan was very resilient, and my granddad as well. So her parents were very resilient. They were hardworking. They didn't have a lot, but they made the most of what they had. And she was an only child. And some people who are only children might get quite spoilt and stuff. My mum really wasn't spoilt. She was really brought up to sort of good work ethic, go out, be kind, So I would say it's probably because of that. And my nan was one of three sisters, and they were all very much like that. And if you look at their children, which is my cousin that I talk about, she was an only child as well. And that they're very similar in their upbringing and the way they are. And I think it comes from an older generation. So I think that sort of resilience comes from them in really striving. They had a harder time trying to kind of get on to the house, and buying a house and all of those sort of things. And my mum sort of then never took anything for granted. And me and my brother were pretty much brought up like that, in the sense of, it's hard now as parents as a whole, that you want to give, and you get everything you want. Where we were brought up in a generation, and my mum made us to look after our things. You got one set of trainers, and you looked after them, your coat and all of that. So I think it probably comes and stems from the more simpler life that actually we possibly don't have now in society, that then grounds that individual and be appreciative of the things that you have.
Everything's so instant gratification now, isn't it? Like, whereas
Totally.
before you had to actually graft for it, you wanted to afford it, and then you'd go to the shop and you'd buy it. Whereas now you and I could get on Amazon and we could buy
Yeah,
whatever we wanted
totally.
and it'll be here
Y
tomorrow. So I think you're absolutely right. And this, look, this next question is just so big when you're talking about a parent.
Yeah,
And so I understand it's a difficult one,
yeah,
but thinking about your mum and thinking
yeah.
about the biggest impact she had on you,
Mhm.
how did she change the way that you show up in the world now?
Well, I think to go back to that ideology of what I was talking about of when I came out, just making me feel completely safe. I didn't feel safe to first come out. So to make me feel safe and feel completely comfortable and push me to just be my true self and not worry about it and no judgment and no, you can't do this, you can't do that. Just embrace it, be who you want to be and see how we get on was a real turning point, I think, because I think it allowed me to just embrace it because it was like being you go from sort of coming out and being 20 years old to then being like a 16-year-old kid again because you're doing the first of everything that you may have already done when you were in school. And I never, even when I went through separations with boyfriends and partners, she was the first person I called because she had created that place and I was able to go home. And I appreciate, I want to say, not everyone has that. And I have, and I'm really appreciative and lucky to have had that. Um so I think that to me is a huge, huge thing that sort of stays with me is the fact that she allowed me to just feel safe.
No, I think it's so important, and I don't think it needs to be. I mean, we're both parents, but I don't think it even needs to be in a parent context. I think it can be with colleagues, with
Yeah,
friends, with
totally.
that safe space right now. I mean, this is one of the reasons why we've done this podcast, is because I want to share positive stories to show that people
Totally.
the world is not not all
No, no, no,
terrible.
no.
You're listening to the Brilliant Humans podcast, where here's the catch: no one talks about themselves, only the brilliant human who changed their life. If you've got someone you'd like to celebrate, drop us a note at brillianthumanspodcast@gmail.com. But even amazing people get it wrong sometimes.
Yeah,
And,
totally.
and and with hindsight, is there anything that you would have liked to have done differently?
Uh, yeah, I think like really interesting if there's anything. And although I wouldn't change it, so this is like going to be a bit of a sort of like weird answer. I wish she had faced death really differently. Because deep down, knowing the person that she was, and I think, as we've talked about, the way she was so resilient when she was diagnosed with MS and everything like that, with getting cancer and being diagnosed and that sort of end of life sort of printed on you, she just really struggled with it, and I think it was because she didn't wanna know, so she didn't know for a very long time, and then she did find out, and then it was sort of like we just didn't talk about it, and we didn't really in her head, she was gonna get better because she could just fight it, and I just wish she had done it differently because I think she would have loved to have done it differently with whether it was cards or writing stuff or, like, not doing anything, so I don't think she would have wanted to do anything, but just sort of like leaving those messages. But hindsight's a beautiful thing, Jonathan. But I just think it was not until she got into the hospice that she really sort of relaxed and wasn't so down and struggling because I think that was what she was finding hard because the difference in that sort of like last week before she passed where she was getting people in, she was sneaking them into the hospice because she was still on COVID terms. You could only have two people come in. And she was like sneaking in, saying, oh, it's my hairdresser, it's my nail person, and like getting friends to come in to just paint her nails and say it was the way she could catch up. that's the side that I wish she had sort of embraced with the other element. So I think it's just that really. But I think you can never be inside someone else's mind when you're mentally going through that. How can you prepare?
I think from what I'm hearing, it sounds like all her good stuff was the resilience and how she was brought up, but it sounded like she didn't want to be a burden. And actually, that resilience kind of then manifested itself in, I'm just going to ignore this and just crack on with life. When actually, that's the point where you kind of she didn't want to do that. Do you know,
No,
so
exactly.
all her good stuff was great
Yeah,
until it came to her, and then it was like,
yeah.
actually, now is the
This
time
is
when
too much.
you could come and ask for help.
Hmm.
Um,
Exactly.
well, look, thank you for answering that so honestly, because
No.
it's a tough question,
Yeah, yeah,
particularly when you're
yeah.
talking about someone you love so much. But I mean, what's the biggest lesson? What do you would love other people to know? So if you were going to say, people listening to this, if you were going to say, "Hey, I want you to take this from my mum," what would it
Mm.
be?
I think in this world, and the world we're living in right now, it's really poignant that everyone has a story and everyone has walked a different life or has experienced many different things. And that's what makes a person unique. And I think the key really to something that I always learn is my mum sort of never really judged someone. She'd give everyone the time of day. Even if she could probably tell that this was possibly not her sort of type of person or anything. My mum was a smoker. She'd meet many, many, many random people out in the smoking area, and it was like an in joke when she was on holiday with my dad, because it would be like, "Well, how many friends did you make?" And she'd be like, "Oh, I met this lovely person," and she'd never see him again. But she knew everything about them. She had this great way of allowing people or people feeling comfortable to open up to her, and I just think that is what I would probably say is we often get so caught up in the rush that we don't do the simple things of acknowledging or giving people time. We give people time that we know, but sometimes it's the stranger, the person on the tube that needs a smile or just a how are you? And I think that is something my mum was really good at. Just talking to everybody. And sometimes I would be guilty of it, of being like, oh my God, like, what's she talking about? And then she would, and then it would be like, you'd find out that this person knew a lot about me. Why? I don't even know this person. So, but there's something really beautiful about the fact of feeling comfortable to just talk and share, because that can really lift someone, and you might be the conversation and the only conversation that that person has had. So I think if anything, it was just how we can all sometimes take for granted just the simple things in life of just talking to people.
I mean, I think about my granddad actually and that's why I'm smiling, and also just thinking about your mum with a fag in her hand, just telling this stranger all about her son. But I remember really clearly being at I think it was King's Cross Station. I was waiting for a train. There was a guy next to me, and he's just started to try and talk to me. This is years ago, before we had
Mm,
all our smartphones, and I remember thinking at the time, I really could do without talking to this guy
yeah.
right now, and anyway, he persevered, and I just thought, and I just let it go. It was just, really remember just going, do you know what? Okay, we're going to do this. And I had the most incredible conversation with this man,
Yeah.
to the point where afterwards I was in my notebook, his name was John as well, but John, and I was jotting down just to remember John. And you go, I wouldn't have had that conversation. And I do worry about the smartphone thing. I do worry that we
Yeah.
are just closing ourselves off. Um, again, I'm far from perfect. I don't do that all the time, but I think
No.
we need to do more of it. So I love that, what you just said there. I'm going to really think about that a lot.
It's so important to do it. It is so important just to say hello. Kindness costs nothing. in this day and age, and it's the simplest thing, but it really costs nothing. And it just, like you just said, you just really don't know what sort of golden nuggets you might find out about someone. And I've been in that and had conversations with someone, and the worst thing, the funniest thing is like that 6th degree of separation, that then you know someone that knows someone that knows them, and you're like, oh my god, this is just like weird that we've been connected. But it is so important, and I think, just especially, and I know I keep saying it, where we are in the world right now, we just need so much more kindness. And this is why something like this is so incredible, because it doesn't always have to be the big people that have done big things that create big impacts. It can be people, everyday people, that make huge impacts on people's lives.
So this is going to bring me to the last question.
Yeah.
And this is a bit of a tough one to ask, but I'm going to, what would you like to say to your mum if you had a
Oh.
chance?
Oh, well, I think the question we often ask anyone who's grieving, and grief doesn't just vanish after a certain period of time, is, are you still making them proud? Am I still making you proud? And am I still doing it right? She was my check-in, my person that I would sort of like check in with or keep me in check. So I think if there is anything, it would be that, but also just to say thank you. I didn't not say the things I didn't want to say to her, but I wish I'd said thank you a little bit more. So I think they would be the things that, if I could say anything to her now, those would be the things. Am I still doing it? And I will be, I'll say it now. She'd probably say, no, actually, you could probably do it a little bit better if you'd done it. So I think I already know the answers to some of the questions that I would ask. But I think that's probably a space that us people who are grieving often feel, in that void of really not knowing, am I doing this right still?
Yeah. Look, well, that's lovely. And I think one of the things I say in the outro to this is, if you've got a brilliant human, why wait? Why
Yeah.
wait? Just go and tell them they're brilliant. Say thank you. And oh God, I mean, you had time to say goodbye, and she was in the hospice. But some people don't. Some people, it's just
No.
very sudden, and that scares me. So I know that that's something I'm going to work on moving forward, is telling people that I love them. Telling people that are brilliant, they're brilliant. Particularly my parents, because I really don't do that
Yeah.
enough. So, Ryan, thank you so much. I mean, I really feel like I've got such an amazing image of this, particularly her nails. I mean, like, I want to see those fabulous nails. So, I mean,
Yeah.
maybe you could send a photo and we could put that up in as part of the show notes, just her with her nails. But yeah, I mean, look, it's so brave of you to come on and share, and I'm so grateful that you're continuing her legacy like this. So thank you so much.
No worries. Thank you for having me, and just keep talking about these brilliant humans, because right now we just need to hear more of these positive stories.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
And you do a lot of fundraising. So before we go, like, how can people sort of support the hospice that your mum was in?
Well, you can donate at St Francis Hospice by looking just on their donate page. But yeah, often there might be little fundraisers that we're doing, or bits and pieces. But yeah, that's the best way. I know times are hard right now, but even if it's £1, it really does help.
Yeah. So there we go. Look, thank you so much. You've been amazing as always,
No
and
worries.
I'm really grateful for you for sharing your brilliant humour with us. So thank you.
No worries. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you for listening to the Brilliant Humans podcast. If you've got a brilliant human you'd like to celebrate, then email us at brillianthumanspodcast@gmail.com to find out how to share their story. Or if there's someone you'd simply like to thank, why not tell them right now? It might just make their day. See you next time.